Greetings and thank you for tuning in to the preliminary forum for the 35th District, Position 2 of the legislature. We have with us today the incumbent, Fred Finn, and the challenger, Glenn Gaithner. There's a third person. She's not here. Her name is Linda Simpson, and she is busy with the duties of the state National Guard for this season. But I think we can hear a good deal here about these two gentlemen. We'll start with the challenger and get acquainted with him. What can you say for yourself? Why are you running, and what is your background?
My name is Glenn Gaither. I'm running for position 2 against Mr. Finn. I've been a state employee for 9 years with the Department of Corrections and a firearms instructor, officer with the department. I've also worked in different fields, in construction, as a commercial diver, and as a fly fishing guide. One of the reasons I really started getting interested in the political process was that I was seeing things in our laws that weren't really quite working out for the safety of the public. I was concerned with things that had to do with child safety, the monitoring of sex offenders, and then the growing violence on our streets and in our prison system.
And that's what got you involved and interested.
Yeah, I'm pretty much a big guy on public safety. I think that the first function of government is to protect its citizens, and it seems like we're kind of stepping a little bit further back from that than we have in the past. We're reducing the number of law enforcement officers on the street. We're having more problems with sex offenders. We've got an insurgence of Latino gang members that are basically taking over the drug trade in the state, and we're really not equipped to deal with that right now.
And Mr. Finn, you've been there. How come you want to stay? How can you survive for another term?
Occasionally, Virginia, I ask that question myself. I'm Fred Finn. It was my honor to serve the last 2 years as your state representative in the 35th District. It's been a challenging time, as I think we all know. We, like 48 out of the 50 states, had major budget deficits. I think we handled ours responsibly in a fiscally conservative manner, though not perfectly by any chance of the imagination. I've ended up serving on 7 different committees. I think they saw me coming when I came into the legislature. I was elected vice chair of the Technology, Energy, and Communications Committee and assistant majority whip. I also was fortunate enough to have 4 bills passed in the environmental area and having to do with with spurring job growth in the 35th District and increasing penalties for theft of timber services. I got involved in this because of my involvement on the Griffin School Board, where I served for 9 years. I was also a founding director of the Washington Business Bank, as well as the Boys and Girls Club in Thurston County. I live in Thurston County, and also was president of Big Brothers Big Sisters. So I just look forward to a good, challenging campaign. I think we've done pretty well in the 35th, but there's a lot more to do in terms of job growth, I think, in the area particularly.
Well, the format this time will be that I will ask one of you a question, and then the other one will have the first answerer will have 2 minutes. The second one will agree or disagree within 1 minute. Then the next question will be other way around. I hope that this will be something that you can handle. The timer over there will keep track of you. 2 minutes first, 1 minute second. What would you see as the 2 or 3 major areas, other than keep getting the budget balanced, for the next session.
Would you like me to go
Yeah,
first? Okay.
you go first, and then I'll go back to
I
you.
think the major issues are going to be, number one, jobs, 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 and how do you spur jobs in this this challenging economic environment. We did fairly well in the 35th. We had pontoons were part of one of the floating bridge bills that we got through, and that's going to mean hundreds of jobs down in Grays Harbor. I had a bill that would that saves some of the jobs of the hatchery workers up in the Mason County area. But I think that's going to be a critical issue. There's another piece of legislation that passed the Senate, which was a job credit for new hires that I hope to see. It did not get through the House, but I hope to see it get through the House. Also, education. We have to fulfill our constitutional requirement to fully fund the basic education. We've set along a pathway that I think has been constructive and positive, but we haven't really gotten the guts to find the money to do it. And as our primary obligation under our state's constitution, I think that's going to be a major issue. I don't think we can avoid some other issues that are critical. Certainly, crime, and Mr. Gaither will talk, I'm sure, on that a little bit, is important. We've had some progress this year in that area, and it was one of the few bipartisan bills that came through where Republicans and Democrats worked very well together in response to those terrible shootings that they had up north here. So I think those are the main issues, plus environmental issues are very much on the forefront. In my district, in the 35th, the environment is critical for the tourism business, for the diving businesses up in Hood Canal area. All of those things I think are going to be important.
And what would you say to those, or what would you add?
I think that we're at a point where we need to reprioritize. You know, there are so many different things that are important to the citizens and different citizens in the state. But I think the first thing would be public safety. We've got to focus on public safety, because if you got a nice street and all your infrastructure is perfect and we got great schools, but you're concerned about your child disappearing off a street corner or someone selling drugs in your neighborhood and bringing violence to that neighborhood, then really we're kind of defeating the purpose. Second would be, as Mr. Finn said, jobs. And according to the state, 2/3 of those new jobs are going to be coming from small business. So what we need to do is create an environment friendly to small business so that we can create the jobs. You know, if I'm talking to business leaders in the community, the small business, even the micro business like the latte stands, flooring places and stuff like that, they're saying basically the same thing. We're breaking even, or we're just barely keeping afloat. So I'd like to see them have more of an opportunity by being able to keep more of their tax dollars so they can use that to expand and grow and create those jobs. And then the third thing for me would be education. We're spending, I believe, like 44% of our budget on education. And in my profession, I see a lot of guys that are high school graduates. You know, I look up their record. This guy graduated from high school. He's 23 years old, so I'm guessing he graduated within a 4 or 5 year period, or even more recently, some of the 19, 20 years old. And they've graduated. But when you go to read something that they've written to a counselor, they're basically functionally illiterate. They've got letters that are 1 inch tall, sentences, you know, can't be deciphered into anything legible. So somewhere we're losing, you know, students. So we're spending all this money, but there's also the issue that a lot of kids are getting graduated from high school and they don't have the tools that they need to get out into the job market and be successful.
What are your budget priorities?
Well, they'd be the same as my other priorities. You know, we got to look at what's the most important to the citizens of the state and what's going to, you know, what we can let go. You know, we have like a new agency out there, fairly new, which is the Puget Sound Partnership, which basically is repeating or doing the same job as the EPA is supposed to do. We have laws out there that protect our streams and rivers. We need the enforcement out there to make sure that they're protected.
Who do you think is being starved in the budget?
Well, I'd hate to say DOC because that's where I'm working at, but no, there are a lot of agencies that are being not necessarily starved, but where there are cutbacks. You know, and if you have to look at something as far as a cutback, you're going to have to look at it. I think as what's going to affect the greatest amount of people. You know, if people are unsafe out in their communities, then that's really the greatest impact. So we really need to focus on safety first. Anywhere you work, anywhere where you play, there's, you know, the whole theme and everything is safety first. Just start there and then kind of reprioritize down from there.
And what's your priorities?
Well, I think that the number one priority has to be, as required by our state's constitution, is fulfilling our obligation to fully fund basic education in the state. We have a court decision right now that says we're going on the right direction, but we're not there yet. We've got more to do, and I think that is would be my number one priority. Public safety, I certainly would agree with Glenn, is an important priority also. And I would come back to my first point, which is jobs within this community. I think that's both a regional concern, a state concern, a national, and in fact an international concern with the economy problems that we've seen across the world.
Well, aside from money, what do you think it is that the state should do for education?
Well, I think there's, you know, education has been debated forever, and you find there are concepts that are talked about now that you'd look back 10 or 15 years ago and they were called something else, and they were the same kind of concepts. I think money is important in education, that we have to pay our teachers a fair living wage. I also think it's important that we have some kind of reasonable system of accountability. And in there, the definition is, the devil is in the details, because it is very hard to come up with one. But I think we're all judged in our life, in our business. I'm a businessman for 35 years, and I'm judged by the dollars and cents, and I think there's nothing wrong with having other folks judge. But I tell you, it is a very difficult situation, and most of the systems for accountability that I've seen come up are imperfect, because you can't tell of a student's progress, whether that's because the teacher's been great, or if he's having problems or she's having problems because they have got a home life issue, concerns, or maybe their family didn't have food to eat. So it's a real difficult issue, but I think we have to keep working with the teachers' unions and the stakeholders and parents, everybody get involved, because there's really nothing more important that we as the state do than education, I think.
What do you think about, what do you do besides throw money at the education?
Well, you know, as I was stating before, I've got guys that are graduating from high school that I deal with daily that are functionally illiterate. So if we have a system in DOC where it's like, focus on the basics. Let's make sure that they have the basic tools so that they can function when they leave school. And the basics, which are math, reading, writing, science, you know, these are things that also prepare them for college. And if you've got students that once they get in a high school level are deciding, well, I'm going to pursue medicine or electrical engineering, then tailor classes for them so that they can succeed in that or continue on with that endeavor. If they're more of the mechanically minded, or they want to do construction or any type of other skills, trade, then focus in that direction. But everybody should be able to leave high school fully literate and able to do basic math and function in society so they can balance a checkbook, fill out a job application, and read a manual whenever they get to the job. You know, they may have to be able to read a manual, understand what's going on at the job site.
Reading the manual.
Reading the manual.
If you should be elected, what would you do about Capitol Lake? Maintain it as a lake? Go to an estuary? Or what's your feeling on that?
Well, Capitol Lake, if I'm correct, has salmon running through it. I'm pretty sure that I am. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time in Olympia because I'm tucked away up at Lake Cushman, but I've been to the where they have the ladder system for the salmon migrating. So I think we really need to maintain it as an estuary or anything else. I mean, it's like, I'm a fly fisherman. So when you see reduced numbers of salmon running in, or you see trout and you're starting to see more hatchery fish than you are natural fish in the environment, then you start getting concerned. You know, I practice careful catch and release. I like seeing things come back to the way that they used to be maybe 100 years ago as far as estuaries. We're taking dams out and restoring streams to their natural, you know, original course, so to speak, so that we can work on getting the salmon runs back and kind of trying to balance things out.
But there have been a number of studies on what should be done, and it's a pretty divisive issue. I tend to think at this stage that I have some concerns about letting it revert to an estuary in terms of what it's going to do to the harbor area in Olympia and the boaters and the folks that recreate in the area. And I grew up on a lake, and periodically we had to dredge that lake, and it certainly has some expense. But I'm not convinced that if we were let it go back to an estuary right now, that would, in the long term, that would make good sense for all of the citizens of the Olympia area.
As a result of the Public Records Act and the electronic age, there's a lot of volume in the requests for state documentation to be put out to the people who want it for one purpose or another. And that's a bit costly. Sometimes those requests are stonewalled a bit. What's your feeling about that one? How do you handle that expense? And how do you handle the openness of government? I think I gave you this is yours for first.
Okay.
Okay, well,
But I just was looking at
It's
your
Glenn's first?
expression.
Okay,
So,
okay.
but you go first.
Oh, okay.
I'll
All
let
right. Either way. I think the balancing of the public's right to know what the government is doing to them or about them is absolutely critical in our democracy. And I think there's few things that are more important. I think that occasionally they do get stonewalled, requests for public information. But also I have seen it the other way around, which is there are frivolous requests designed to do nothing more than to harass the entity or the organization. I think both issues are real issues. And I think periodically we should go back and look. We don't have any control over the federal public access to information law, but there are some state requirements. I think we should periodically relook at them to see if they're being abused either by government or by people doing a frivolous document request designed just to cost the agency money, time, or hassle factor.
I agree that as far as government goes, we want to have an open and transparent government. But then again, we also need to protect the privacy of the citizens. I see this is a big issue at the Department of Corrections where inmates are using information. They're getting lists of officers, their names, their address, where they live, and that tends to put people at risk. If too much private information is out there, then that's not the safest environment for us. But as far as government goes, yeah, we need clear transparency. We need to see what's going on in every agency. We need people like Brian Sontag that are out there doing audits and holding government accountable to the citizens. But it can be abused, and we see that against law enforcement and in corrections. There's a lot of frivolous lawsuits in the Department of Correction that are caused by inmates just making a statement. We have a system now through the Prison Rape Elimination Act where an inmate just has to make a statement, it becomes a fact, it turns into an investigation, and we're spending a lot of money there. We're wasting a lot of money, and mostly these allegations are unfounded. Then they go to use private information against staff. They get lists of everybody's name, where they live, and they put that information out to other offenders and people in the community.
Do you see a way of stopping that?
Well, that's a tough one. They have that ability to use the court systems and to get that information. That's protected. But maybe we're allowing too much of that. At some point, we have to step back and say, okay, if this guy's going to have X number of information about individuals, is that going to put a person at jeopardy, or is that going to invade their privacy to a point where they really don't have their privacy?
You indicated that people come out of high school without being particularly literate, but some of them come out and want to go to college, and the cost is getting up there. It's raised 14%. what do you do about that?
That's, I've got 4 kids at home, and I'm concerned about that. My oldest son, who's out there in the world already, he's in the Air Force. And so he used the military, the GI Bill to get himself through college. The other one, it was a combination of his mother and I working together to try to get him through school, and that worked out pretty good. But it is getting more cost prohibitive. There's got to be a program, other than, going through the military, but maybe through some kind of civil service training or something to that effect, through volunteerism, where they can get some cash to help them out through college. We have Pell Grants and things of that nature, too, that are available to students that are of a higher achievement level. And I didn't mean to say that when kids leave high school that they're functionally illiterate. I'm saying that there's a group of kids that are still allowed to leave the high school without the tools they need to survive out in the real world.
I understand the distinction. What do you have to say on that?
I agree with most of what Glenn has said on that issue. I went to graduate school on the GI Bill. I served in the Army during the Vietnam period, and that was a major issue. I think this last year in the budget for higher education suffered a little bit more than a number of the other areas, and there's concern what's going to happen this go around. I've seen it personally in my own home. Just this week, my daughter has, despite having an A- average, is trying to get into nursing school, and she could not get into South Puget Sound Community College because their slots were full, and so she's had to leave the state and go back east and get her nursing degree. And that we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't. I mean, that investment in higher education and in skills training, even when it isn't college, when it's technical school, I think ought to be right up there, just behind basic education, as a priority in our state.
It appears that Initiative 1098 is going to get on the ballot, which involves a change in taxation. What's your reaction to that? I think you're number one there.
I assume this is the Gates
Yeah.
Gates-sponsored initiative, which basically would provide for an income tax and a reduction in the state's portion of real estate taxes, as well as a reduction in the B&O tax. In theory, it sounds great. I mean, our tax system in the state is very regressive. If you're a poor person, you pay a greater percentage of your income through sales taxes than you would through an income tax. But, and this is the big but, what kind of faith do you have that the legislature or somebody else, it would probably be the legislature, isn't going to come back in year 2 or 3 or 4 and take that? I think that it's set now at $400,000 income level. Those are the only folks that would be paying the income tax, and take that level from $400,000 down to $100,000 down to $40,000. And that's the thing that is troubling to many folks in our district.
You go ahead and answer that.
He's right, but I think that the 400,000 was broke up. It's like 400,000 per couple if you have joint incomes, and then 200 for the individual. What I'm worried about is that most of our jobs are supposed to be coming from small businesses. If they're going to look at a guy that owns a small business, whether it's a software company or whatever, and say, hey, you know what? Last year you made $400,000, or $200,000 as an individual. And so we're going to add income tax onto that, because this is your income. They're going to maybe look at the whole thing, gross versus net. And so companies that are struggling now may look at a friendlier environment like Idaho and say, well, okay, this is what the new tax situation is. I'm going to take my business out of state with me. And as Mr. Finn said, at what point do they start lowering, the standard on who's going to get income tax? You look at California, and they started with a high income tax, and they kept gradually bringing it down and down and down. And sales tax didn't go away. Sales tax went up.
Well, there is a provision in there that says that it has to be both passed by the legislature and by the voters to change those limits.
And I think we're seeing a lot more.
Do you think that's going to happen?
I would hope not. I'm trying to, like I said, I want to keep the environment friendly for our small business people. We want to keep as many of the businesses that we can in this state so we have the jobs that we need for the economic recovery.
I'll just add just one small thing. In fairness to the proposal, there is a a help on the B&O tax, which would impact those small businesses. So it's not all bad on small business.
Well, I guess we could stop and talk taxes forever and nobody would like it. Everybody hates taxes, but we have to pay them. Yeah. Somebody does anyway. Yeah. It's very nice to have had you with us today, and I wish you both good luck. But let's remind the hearers that they have a job to do too. We bring these forums to you because we believe that being informed about your voting is very important, and getting there to do it then is required as well. And I trust that you will do your duties as well as you gentlemen, one of you, doing yours. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.